I know I told you that the next episode was going to come out on the day I started this podcast, but today is not that day. This is a bonus episode that I decided to sneak in before I launch the next one. It's going to be kind of like a story, so it's definitely not going to be within 5 minutes. So if you have longer than 5 minutes, stick around. The glory of mountains on earth is incomparable. They are the islands of the sky, and their might is perfectly balanced with the deep, quiet, and mysterious valleys. Imagine yourself in an amphitheater, one that only the mountains can create. You're standing on a broad plain surrounded by rich, earthly inclines that have tall and ancient forests. The air is filled with the violent roar of the river as it slices the plain into two halves. Scores of sheep are seen flocking on the green pastures of the plain. Such is the arrangement of the mountains that wherever your eyes fall, they will be refreshed. For you would think that you were looking not at the earth, but at a view painted to the highest level of beauty by a power that cannot be controlled by man himself. At 14,000 feet, Hampta Pass is a rare dramatic pass crossing that connects the lush green valley of Kullu and the barren mountainscape of Lahaul. What makes the climb to the Hampta Pass thrilling is that you get a diverse and a grand range of experiences. Streams that run along the entirety of the valley, beautiful forest trails, challenging rocky sections, ice-cold river crossings, and offbeat waterfalls. It's a complete package and a great tale of adventure, full of surprises that leave you in awe. Each day in the 5-day trek was different than the previous one with rapid changes in the scenic terrain. I went in a group of 21, which had a diverse range of individuals from engineers and directors to government consultants and food scientists. Even our trek lead Shivank was a young guy who left his corporate job to find his true calling in the mountains. Our love for the mountains united all of us to an experience that was nothing less than a dream. It didn't matter where one had come from, what beliefs they held, how privileged they were, or what problems they were fighting. All of us were escaping our realities and giving ourselves a chance to learn from one another and change our perspectives in life. For the majority of us, it was our first Himalayan trek, and our diary of experiences were waiting to be inked forever. We started from Manali on day 1 in a traveler to head to our base camp at Jobra. Every moment of that drive was filled with panoramic views of the Kullu Valley. I remember spotting everyone glued to the windows for the entirety of the drive. From apple orchards to deodar forests to oaks, the flora perfectly enhanced the picturesque drive. After a quick cup of chai and coffee at the base camp, we headed out on our adventure, beginning with a narrow passage into the forest. Our senses were immediately attacked. It was a visual overload with beautiful maple trees and tall conical pine trees whose thick bark would reach all the way into the skies. The 30-minute trek through the forest trail eventually opened to a huge rock that overlooked a meadow adorned with small rocks and the iconic yellow tents at our campsite. It even had a river running between, the Rani Nalla, which was surrounded by hills on both sides. The first night at the campsite, I found it hard to sleep in the tent. It wasn't tardiness that made me uneasy, but a weird combination of excitement and discomfort. I just laid there in my sleeping bag listening to the water of the Rani Nalla trickling past the rocky deposits. Several flashbacks of the nights I would play calming river sounds in my headphones to sleep came to me. But it wasn't even close to what I was experiencing. A poetic song with an aura that could only be created by Mother Nature herself. At some point, I got lured into a deep sleep, but even that was cut short because we had to get up early in the morning the next day. After twisting and turning and wiggling in the sleeping bag for a while, I finally gave in and got up to seize whatever was coming for me on day 2, which was from Jobra to Jwara. On day 2, I could see more people casually indulging in conversations over a hot cup of black tea. It was literally chai pe charcha. The energy that everyone radiated was warm, welcoming and friendly, or like Gen Z would like to say, good vibes everywhere. And before long, we packed our bags and left the campsite at first light. In front of us was a moderately long trek of 4 hours to gain an altitude of almost 2000 feet to reach the Jora campsite. There was a river crossing early in the trek, but fortunately there was a metal plank placed atop two stony structures to act as a bridge. With hills on either side, nature was at its absolute best as sheep and cows grazed the meadows that were lined with perfectly beautiful pine trees. Rocks were sprinkled throughout the entire path like seasoning on a perfectly baked pizza. The closer we got to our destination, the rockier our path got. The path led us to a walled valley where on one side were rock faces and the other was a cliff-like ridge of land with the river flowing below. With a short descent, we reached the most thrilling part of the journey, which was to cross the river on foot. We tied our boots on our backpacks and split ourselves into two batches to form a human chain. The thrill of holding hands and negotiating with the river in a single file is unbelievable. The water literally pricks your feet as if you were stepping on 1,000 thorns. Our poor legs got so numb that we had to scream in exhilaration and motivate each other to continue taking that next step. All the fatigue and pain in our legs vanished as soon as we came out of the water on the other side. Would I call it one of the hardest parts of the trek? Definitely. Because God knows that the moment I stepped into the water, all I prayed for was to be able to get out of this torture. Maybe that's why it turned out to be one of my favorite moments in the trek. At the campsite in Jwara, we were welcomed by an ocean of white flowers. It was like we were walking through a stunning aisle of sweet-scented flowers as we do during weddings. And what added to the experience was the fact that there were several bigger-than-life boulders that you could climb to get an aerial view of the entire valley. Remember those drawings we used to make of mountains with the sun shyly setting behind them? Yeah, I saw it with my own eyes. The sun likes to hide. By now, many of us were acquainted with each other and started hanging around more. Every time we gathered in the dinner tent, hours would pass by and we wouldn't even realize it. Games, stories, and finger-licking tasty food. In the mountains. Who'd want to leave the warmth of the tent when it's so comfortable inside? But at night, the temperatures dropped pretty sharply. We found ourselves in 3 layers of clothing and we still struggled to embrace the cold. With an eventful day that it was, sleep was only a seconds away the moment we closed our eyes. Our trek on the third day was comparatively easier, yet somehow tiring. We climbed around 1000 feet from 1100 feet to 1220 feet or so in around 3 to 4 hours. Our trek leader Shivank and the 2 other guides were on break today, and 3 trekkers from the group were selected to fill in their big shoes. From leading the team and motivating them to handling the communication and distributing the food, they had to manage everything. The trek started with a slow-paced walk through the boulder section where you can literally jump across rocks. And a couple of hours into the trek, we spotted a snow-clad mountain peak in the horizon. It was the first time we saw snow in the entire trek. I was wishing we came across a small patch of snow so that, I could do my first snow butterfly. But it was September and it doesn't snow in September. Towards the end of the trek, we came across silver sand that was as soft and smooth as the sand we see on the beach. The trek was from Jwara to Baluka Ghera, and Baluka Ghera translates to the bed of sand. The ground is formed mainly by the sediments and dust brought down by the river. This is the closest one can get to having a beach in the mountains. How cool is that? And within 500 meters of the campsite was one of the most beautiful waterfalls in the mountains that was also kind of hidden from plain sight. Shivang told us that we'd have to climb a very steep segment of boulders to get to the waterfall. Some of us were ready for an adventure and we also had a lot of time to kill. It was a little straining on the knees as we had to take big leaps upwards to climb from one rock to another. From afar, it looked as if the mountain had thrown up to recover from a bad hangover. And we were those little insects who took fascination in that. The view from the top of the rocky ascent was a bird's eye image of the entire valley. With a strong gust blowing into your face, one could almost trip and sail with the wind. But it was worth all the effort. The waterfall was beautiful. We got back to the campsite just in time to witness the sunset. Time lapses, videos, landscape photos, all the cameras were waiting for the perfect shot. But the mountains don't like to be stared at for too long, so a blanket of clouds rushed in to help them feel more secure. With the temperature dropping very quickly, we had an early dinner and decided to hit the sheets as soon as we could. And by the time we decided to call it a night, we were already in an ocean of white vapor. Even the lights from our headlamps would barely disperse into the distance. I guess it was the mountain's way of telling us to go to bed early. Day 4. That was the day that mattered, because it was the hardest day of the trek. It was from Balukaghera to Ciao via the Hampta Pass. This day was the reason why we signed up for the trek. It was a day where we'd have to face a lot of different adversities and overcome them with resilience to get rewarded with a visual treat that deserves to be feasted upon. We woke up at 4 a.m. in the morning, packed our breakfast and lunch, and left by 6 a.m. Today, time was of the essence. We did not have the liberty of stalling unnecessarily or delaying the timeline. We were told that there was going to be a 40% chance of rain. And if I knew anything about probabilities, it was that anything more than 20% should be considered real. In my defense, I've always seen the odds being harsh on the days that shit actually matters. So it's better to accept the worst and be prepared, rather than live in denial and cling to false hope. The trek on that day could be broken down into 2 parts. The climb to Hampta, which was a challenging ascent, followed by a sharp descent to Ciao. We begin by heading into the mountains only to be greeted by some red and yellow flowers along the path. After an hour of the gentle gradient in the rockfall prone area, the incline gets really serious real quick. I swear it felt like I was doing 3 days worth of workouts on that day. There were certain segments in the climb where I could feel my lower back screaming. Part of the blame goes to the bad, packing I did in the morning, which displays the balance of my trekking bag. And I was also carrying more weight on this day because all the essentials that belonged to my sisters were being carried by me. Watching everyone climb along with you and exchanging conversations made the climb less intimidating than it would be if you had no company. Every time I looked ahead, I could see someone pushing themselves to continue taking that next step, and that helped me push myself too. After the first steep incline, we had a quick recovery in the plateau and set out for the next one. There were a couple of steep inclines followed by a gradual one where we could conserve our strength. It was a battle against nature to explore the land that wasn't the friendliest to its visitors. Determination, mental strength, and willpower. We climbed to the end of the first ridge. Even though 4 hours had passed, we were an hour away from the pass. But in terms of distance, we were only 1 ridge away. Finally, as I turned at the bend of the second ridge, I spotted the trek leader and the trek guides congratulating us with claps. Congratulations on completing the Hampta Pass trek. You have arrived. Thank you, I said while I was still panting. It took me a while to settle down and process it all. I was overloaded. My heart was pumping and all my senses were activated to the point where I didn't have the liberty to feel the satisfaction immediately. But eventually, it hit. We made it. In the distance, I could see several peaks covered in snow. The 360-degree view of the mountains was breathtaking. Honestly, I can't even put the experience into words, even if I tried. All I can say is that everyone should trek and experience that feeling. What are we doing on Earth if we're not exploring what it has to offer? The panoramic terrain along the 2 sides of the pass was dramatic. Standing on the pass, we could see 3 valleys, Kullu, Lahore, and Spiti converging. The rocky lush green valley was behind us, and the desert valley was in front. We had totally switched worlds. Fearing the bad weather that was due to come, we decided to descend to our next camp. The descent was trickier than the ascent. With the path narrowing down into a zigzag route, we were in a race against the weather. We could hear the thunder in the distance, and the next thing we know, we were slipping and sliding down the wet soil. The rain wasn't too heavy, but it was cold, like very cold. I'm certain that at some point my hands were so numb that I could light a fire in my hand and still feel chilly. The trail downhill even had loose stones that made your footing unstable. So it felt like a never ending walk that you were so eagerly waiting to finish. The worst part, we couldn't see the base camp even after 2 hours of the downward run. The only silver lining was that we were finally back to the level ground. But our luck was limited. The closer we got to the campsite, the heavier and harder the rain was pelting. Fortunate were we that all of us had arrived safely in our tents before the weather gods decided that it was time to shower some ice pellets into the world. Yes, it was hailstorming. I felt so thankful that we had a roof over our head that day. It was such harsh and such bad weather. God bless waterproof tents. With exhaustion kicking in, I eventually fell asleep listening to the pitter-patter music of the rain. The sleep that came to me on that day was one of the most magical and satisfying sleeps I've ever had. It was a culmination of unnatural, calming weather, a sense of accomplishment, and fatigue. When I woke up, I was feeling disoriented, like I was in a completely different world. After stepping out of the tent, I looked up and realized how powerless we were in those mountains. The mountain that was dry and arid while I entered the base camp was now covered in snow. How can something change so much in such a short span of time? I really couldn't believe it. It was entirely possible that Hampta Pass may have gotten covered in snow as well, and we were the last batch in the season to conquer it. At that moment, I realized that an odds of 40% was actually a gift in disguise. It could have been way worse. A living reminder of the Nova effect. It should come as no surprise that even though we slept in the afternoon, we were so worn out that day that we immediately fell asleep after dinner. The cold had nothing on us compared to the climb that we did through thick and thin. Day 5. From Shiaguru to Chhatru. This was the last day of the trek, and it started with a river crossing. The level of water was lower compared to the first one, and so was its temperature. Armed with the power of Vaseline and coconut oil on our feet, we were all mentally prepared this time. The first step in the water sent a shiver down our spines, but the consecutive steps did not prick like the first river crossing. There were rocks in the riverbed that were slippery, making it hard to balance, but otherwise we weren't unsettled. Day 5 was the only day that we did not have to climb. We were descending along the edge of the mountains. The route was slippery owing to the loose sand and the rainfall of the previous night. We were out of the mountains after about 2.5 hours and even caught a glimpse of a campsite. But dividing our half of the land with that of the campsite was the river Chandra flowing with its full might. With the heavy waves beside you, there was no way to cross the river than to take the longest route up to the iconic metal bridge and walk all the way back to the campsite on road. It reminded me of Bangalore where, on some roads, to take your car to the other side of the road, you have to travel at least a kilometer just to take a U-turn and finally come back. Yes, that's the same thing we did, but on foot. Once we were back at the Chhatru campsite, we had time to kill. No one seemed to want to spend time inside the tent, as we would all be leaving each other in a day or two. Frisbee, tic-tac-toe, and long conversations about what we loved about this trek kept everyone engaged in what I would like to call a very warm and satisfying end to a life-changing experience. It's crazy how 23 individual worlds united into a single experience of grit, determination, newness, and accomplishment on this trek. There was one experience in the trek that I think holds a special place in my heart, which was writing a letter in the mountains. Being disconnected from the world was something I was really looking forward to. And to add a cherry on the top, our trek leader Shivang had brought with him a set of inland postcards to write a letter to whomever you wanted. It could be yourself, your parents, or your loved ones. I contemplated whether I should write to myself, but I didn't. So while I was sitting amidst the mountains and my thoughts were flowing very freely, I wrote a letter to my parents, something I haven't done since school. I poured my heart out into that letter. Every small thing I could thank them for, I did. It was a complete moment for me because I was finally acknowledging how important a role they play in shaping who I am today. So this is something I haven't done enough in my life. So yeah, I would say that Hampta Pass has been nothing less than a gift for me. It has helped me change my perspective on a couple of things, and that I think was needed. Maybe it happened to me at the right time. So yeah, I would suggest that if you ever get a chance, make sure that you get to experience what trekking in the mountains feels like. Everyone should trek. That's what I believe now. And I know that this episode is almost over 20 minutes now, and there's no giveaway, which is weird because all my previous episodes have a giveaway. There's something that you can take. But for a change, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I like talking for 20 minutes continuously, which is also something I've never done in a long time. And it kind of feels weird, sitting on this chair, talking to the mic, and you don't even know what or who the people are listening to your podcast. But I guess who these beautiful souls are, I hope your day is going beautiful, and whatever positive energy that I have today, I'm sending it down your way. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode, which would be the official 50th episode, and that will again be within 5 minutes. Goodbye.